The Continental A-65 engine struggled with the additional weight and drag of the rocket installation. The plane's normal climb rate of 450 feet per minute dropped to barely 200 feet per minute when fully loaded with rockets. Every foot of altitude was precious, representing another second away from effective small arms range, another moment to plan the next attack. The morning of September 20th, 1944, began with thick fog grounding most aircraft. Combat Command A, under Colonel Bruce C. Clark, was holding positions near Arracore when intelligence reported German armor massing for an attack. Carpenter took off, despite the weather, trusting conditions would improve. When the fog lifted around noon, he was already airborne, searching for targets. Below him, elements of the 113th Panzer Brigade were advancing. A company of Panther tanks moved in formation across open ground toward American positions. The German crews, trained to scan for enemy tanks and anti-tank guns, never considered the small observation planes circling overhead as threatening. Carpenter began his attack run, entering the characteristic corkscrew descent that had become his trademark. The dive was steep, the aircraft shuddering as speed built. At precisely 100 yards he fired. 6 rockets streaked toward the lead Panther. The rockets struck the thin roof armor, penetrating into the crew compartment. The tank lurched to a stop, smoke pouring from its hatches. Banking hard left, Carpenter climbed away as machine gun fire erupted from the German column. He could hear bullets punching through the fabric skin of his aircraft as he struggled for altitude. Within 30 minutes he had landed, reloaded, and was airborne again. The second sortie found the German tanks attempting to reorganize. They had spread out, making themselves harder targets, but also disrupting their own advance. Carpenter selected another Panther and dove again. This time, the Germans were ready. Small arms fire filled the air around his aircraft. The distinctive sound of bullets tearing through fabric accompanied him throughout the dive. But his aim remained true. Another Panther was knocked out, its turret crew killed by the blast that penetrated the 16mm roof armor. On his third sortie that afternoon, Carpenter found the surviving tanks beginning to reverse, their advance completely disrupted. By day's end, he had fired 16 rockets total. 2 Panther tanks were confirmed destroyed, the German advance was halted, and the legend of Bazooka Charlie was born. The 4th Armored Division's official history would specifically note his role in stopping a German counterattack. Before Carpenter's attacks, German military doctrine treated observation aircraft as minor annoyances. Standard procedure was to ignore them unless they presented immediate threat. Engaging them would reveal positions and invite artillery strikes, a poor tactical trade. This calculation changed completely after word spread about rocket-armed L-4s. German units began receiving urgent bulletins warning about American observation planes carrying anti-tank weapons. What had been harmless spotters were now potential tank killers requiring immediate engagement. Carpenter noticed the change immediately. As he told a Stars and Stripes reporter, every time he showed up now, they shot with everything they had. They never used to bother Cubs. The bazookas must be bothering them considerably. The impact on German operations went beyond tanks actually destroyed. Tank commanders now had to constantly watch the skies for slow-moving aircraft. Formations had to spread out when L-4s appeared, disrupting momentum and coordination. Anti-aircraft weapons had to be redirected from protecting against fighter bombers to engaging observation planes. Infantry units were ordered to engage any L-4 with rifles and machine pistols, creating a curtain of fire that made low-altitude operations increasingly hazardous. The 113th Panzer Brigade, which entered the Battle of Arracore with 90 tanks, would have only 27 operational within a week. While not all these losses can be attributed to Carpenter, his attacks contributed to psychological pressure that degraded German combat effectiveness. Tank crews, who had felt relatively safe from air attack in poor weather, now faced a threat that could appear any time. Days after his success at Araucourt, Carpenter caught German armor attempting to attack near Chateau Salin. Diving through intense small arms fire, he destroyed a Panzer IV with a direct hit to its engine deck. The burning tank blocked a narrow road, trapping vehicles behind it and making them easy targets for American tank destroyers. A week later, near Moncourt Woods, Carpenter spotted Tiger tanks supporting a German infantry attack. The Tigers, with their 88mm guns and heavy armor, were the most feared tanks in the German arsenal. Each weighed 57 tons and mounted armor up to 100mm thick on the front hull. But their roof armor was only 25mm, still vulnerable to Carpenter's rockets. His attack on the Tigers required exceptional courage. These tanks were typically surrounded by infantry and light anti-aircraft guns, specifically to protect against air attack. Carpenter dove through a curtain of tracer fire, released his rockets at minimum range, and pulled up just as explosions erupted behind him. One Tiger was confirmed destroyed, its ammunition detonating in a spectacular explosion. The impact extended beyond physical destruction. German tank crews, already stressed by American material superiority, now faced a threat from an unexpected direction. They could no longer park under trees for concealment. The L4s could spot them anyway. They couldn't ignore the sound of small aircraft engines. Anyone might be armed. Each mission Carpenter flew pushed the boundaries of both physics and probability. The L4 was never designed for combat. Its fuel tanks were not self-sealing. A single tracer round could turn the aircraft into a fireball. The pilot sat surrounded by nothing more than steel tubing and fabric, completely exposed to enemy fire. In his letters home, carefully censored to avoid worrying his wife, Carpenter hinted at the dangers. After one mission, he wrote simply that he'd had some excitement that day. The plane had a few more holes but still flew fine. What he didn't mention was that those holes represented near misses that could have severed control cables, punctured fuel lines, or struck the pilot himself. Ground crews who serviced Rosie the rocketer began keeping informal tallies of the damage. After particularly intense missions, they would count dozens of bullet holes requiring patches. The crew chief reportedly told other pilots that Carpenter's plane looked like Swiss cheese after one engagement, yet somehow both pilot and aircraft continued to fly. The psychological pressure was immense. Unlike bomber crews flying at 20,000 feet, relatively removed from immediate violence, Carpenter engaged at point-blank range. He could see individual German soldiers firing at him, see expressions on tank commanders' faces as they realized what was happening. The combat was intensely personal and immediate. Wes Gallagher, the Associated Press correspondent who interviewed Carpenter multiple times, wrote in Liberty magazine that the Major was already a legend in the Third Army. His combination of innovation, courage, and results had made him famous among the troops. The technical challenges of what Carpenter accomplished cannot be overstated. He was essentially conducting dive-bombing attacks in an aircraft designed for straight and level flight at low speeds. The L4 had no dive brakes, no reinforced structure for high-G maneuvers, no armor protection whatsoever. Every dive risked structural failure. Every pullout strained the airframe beyond its design limits. The electrical firing system had to be simple enough to work reliably after hours of vibration and extreme maneuvers, yet robust enough to function in combat conditions. It could be repaired with basic tools in field conditions. Aiming remained entirely visual and intuitive. Carpenter developed his own system of reference points, using the engine cowling, cockpit framework, and even scratches on the windscreen as aiming guides. He calculated lead angles based on approach speed and dive angle, compensating for wind drift and rocket trajectory. There was no backup system, no second chance. If he missed, he had to climb away under fire and try again. The rockets themselves presented unique challenges. The M6A3 heat rounds were designed for ground combat, fired from a soldier's shoulder at relatively stationary targets. Fired from a moving aircraft, their accuracy decreased significantly. The rocket motor burned for only 0.3 seconds, reaching maximum velocity quickly, then coasting to the target. Wind, aircraft motion, and the rocket's inherent inaccuracy meant that even perfect aim didn't guarantee a hit. The Battle of Arrancourt, where Carpenter achieved his most famous success, represented more than just a tactical engagement. It was the largest tank battle on the Western Front, with American forces ultimately destroying 200 German tanks and assault guns while losing only 25 of their own. The German plan called for the 5th Panzer Army to break through American lines and recapture Nancy, threatening Patton's entire advance. The attacking force included some of Germany's best remaining armored units, though many were under strength and hastily reorganized after disasters in Normandy. The 4th Armored Division bore the brunt of the German assault. Outnumbered significantly, they relied on superior tactics, better logistics, and innovative solutions like Carpenter's tank-hunting L4. The division's tank destroyers, artillery, and armor worked in coordination, with Carpenter providing critical reconnaissance and direct attack capability. His actions on September 20th came at a crucial moment. The German advance had achieved initial surprise, and some American positions were in danger of being overrun. By disrupting the Panther Company's attack, Carpenter bought time for American forces to reorganize and bring up reinforcements. His attack wasn't just tactically successful, it had operational implications for the entire battle. The psychological impact rippled through German ranks. Tank crews, who had felt relatively safe from air attack since American fighter bombers rarely operated in poor weather, now had to fear even the smallest observation aircraft. The need to constantly scan for L4s and disperse when they appeared slowed German operations and disrupted coordination. By November 1944, Carpenter had become a celebrity within the Third Army. Stars and Stripes ran multiple articles about Bazooka Charlie. Popular Science featured him in their February 1945 issue as part of their What's New in Aviation series, Piper Cub Tank Buster. Liberty Magazine, The New York Sun, and other publications picked up his story, making him one of the most famous pilots in the European theater. But fame came with increased danger. German units were specifically warned about rocket-armed Cubs. Anti-aircraft defenses were reinforced with light guns and additional machine guns specifically to counter the L4 threat. Every mission became increasingly hazardous as German gunners gained experience engaging slow-moving aircraft at low altitude. Carpenter's own comments to reporters revealed his fatalistic attitude. Some people thought he was nuts, he said, but he believed that fighting a war meant getting on with it every minute of every hour, all day, every day. When asked about danger, he simply shrugged and said his luck had been marvelous. That luck was tested repeatedly. Beyond the church steeple incident he mentioned in his letter home, there were other close calls. Machine gun fire once severed one of his elevator control cables, leaving him with minimal pitch control for the flight back to friendly territory. Another time, an anti-aircraft shell exploded close enough to pepper his aircraft with shrapnel, miraculously missing both pilot and critical control systems. His crew chief, whose name has been lost to history, reportedly begged Carpenter to stop flying the rocket attacks. The ground crew had seen too many L4s return riddled with holes, or not return at all. But Carpenter continued, driven by a combination of duty and determination that fellow pilots found both inspiring and concerning. Carpenter's courage wasn't limited to aerial combat. On at least one documented occasion, he landed his L4 near a battlefield, grabbed a discarded M1 rifle, and participated in ground combat. After destroying a German column with his bazookas, he landed on a nearby road and took 6 German soldiers prisoner, marching them back to American lines at gunpoint. Another incident involved Carpenter landing near a disabled American Sherman tank under German fire. He climbed onto the tank and manned the .50 caliber machine gun, helping to drive off a German infantry assault while the tank crew conducted emergency repairs. His actions that day earned particular recognition from the tank crew, who credited him with saving their lives. These ground combat episodes earned him recognition beyond his aviation achievements. General Patton himself presented Carpenter with the Silver Star, reportedly saying this was the kind of fighting man he wanted in his army. Carpenter would also receive the Bronze Star with Oak Leaf Cluster and the Air Medal with Oak Leaf Cluster. The ground combat episodes revealed something important about Carpenter's character. He wasn't content to be merely an observer or even a flying tank destroyer. He wanted to be in the fight wherever it was happening, using whatever weapons were available. This attitude, while admirable, also suggested a man pushing himself beyond reasonable limits. Official records credit Carpenter with destroying 6 tanks total, including 2 Tiger I heavy tanks. Unofficial accounts, including claims by witnesses, suggest the number might have been higher. The discrepancy likely reflects difficulty in confirming kills in fluid combat situations where multiple weapon systems engage the same targets. Each confirmed kill required extraordinary circumstances to align perfectly. Weather had to be suitable for flying, but poor enough that German fighters weren't active. Carpenter had to locate targets, approach without being shot down, achieve accurate rocket hits, survive the attack, and return safely. Then the kills had to be verified by ground forces, which wasn't always possible in fast-moving situations. Fellow pilots who witnessed Carpenter's attacks described them as impossible and insane. The 2 Tiger I tanks he destroyed represented particularly impressive achievements. Each Tiger cost 250,000 Reichsmarks to produce and required specialized crews trained for months. They were considered nearly invulnerable to most Allied weapons. Yet they fell to rockets fired from an aircraft that cost the U.S. Army $2,500 and required only basic pilot training to fly. Carpenter's role extended beyond tank hunting. As an observation pilot and General Wood's personal aviator, he provided crucial intelligence that shaped operational decisions. His ability to fly low and slow, combined with his aggressive reconnaissance style, meant he often spotted German movements before other intelligence sources. His reports influenced several major decisions during the Lorraine campaign. When German forces attempted to concentrate for counterattacks, Carpenter's early warnings allowed American commanders to preposition reserves and artillery. His detailed observations of German defensive positions helped plan successful attacks with minimal casualties. The intelligence value of L4s was already well established, but Carpenter's aggressive tactics yielded even more information. By forcing German units to react to his presence, shooting at him, dispersing their formations, moving to cover, he revealed positions and strengths that might otherwise have remained hidden. This intelligence work, while less dramatic than his tank hunting exploits, may have been his most valuable contribution to the war effort. The information he provided saved American lives and shortened engagements that might otherwise have become prolonged battles of attrition. The success of Carpenter's improvised weapon system highlighted a curious aspect of World War II technology. Germany, despite its reputation for advanced weaponry, had no equivalent to the simple, effective L4 observation plane. The Wehrmacht relied on the Fieseler Fe-156 Storch for similar missions, but it was larger, more complex, and produced in much smaller numbers. The American approach of mass-producing simple, reliable equipment proved superior to German emphasis on technological sophistication. The L4 was essentially a civilian aircraft pressed into military service with minimal modifications. Yet its simplicity was its strength. It was easy to fly, maintain, and repair with basic tools and materials. Germany's tank designers had created magnificent machines, optimized for tank versus tank combat. The Panther's long 75mm gun could destroy any Allied tank at ranges where return fire was ineffective. Its frontal armor was nearly impervious to Allied weapons, but this optimization for ground combat left vulnerabilities that simple American ingenuity could exploit. The bazooka itself represented American pragmatism. Developed quickly from a simple concept, mass-produced in huge numbers, it gave every infantry squad anti-tank capability. When Carpenter mounted 6 of them on an observation plane, he created a weapons system German doctrine had never anticipated and couldn't effectively counter. As 1944 turned to 1945, Carpenter continued flying combat missions despite increasing German awareness of rocket-armed Cubs. The Wehrmacht issued specific instructions for dealing with armed observation aircraft, including dedicating anti-aircraft weapons to tracking them whenever they appeared. In December 1944, Carpenter flew reconnaissance missions in terrible weather conditions that grounded most aircraft. His reports on German movements helped American commanders respond to the surprise offensive, known as the Battle of the Bulge. Though he had fewer opportunities for tank hunting in poor weather, his intelligence gathering proved invaluable. January 1945 brought renewed offensive operations as American forces pushed toward the Rhine. Carpenter continued modifying his tactics, experimenting with different attack angles and rocket combinations. He reportedly considered adding more rockets, but was limited by the L-4's weight capacity and structural limits of the wing struts. His last confirmed tank kill came in February 1945, when he destroyed a Panzer IV attempting to defend a bridge crossing. Witnesses described him diving through a wall of tracers to deliver his rockets at point-blank range. The tank's destruction allowed American engineers to capture the bridge intact, accelerating the advance into Germany. In March 1945, Carpenter began experiencing severe fatigue and other symptoms that forced him to reduce his flying schedule. Medical examination revealed advanced Hodgkin's disease, a cancer of the lymphatic system. Army doctors gave him a prognosis of 2 years to live. The diagnosis ended his combat flying immediately. He was evacuated to the United States for treatment, leaving behind Rosie the rocketer and the reputation he had earned as one of the war's most unusual aces. His war was over, though the war itself would continue for 2 more months. The timing was perhaps fortunate. As German forces became increasingly desperate in the war's final months, anti-aircraft defenses became more deadly. Several L-4s attempting to emulate Carpenter's tactics were shot down in March and April 1945. The window of opportunity for his unique form of warfare was closing. Carpenter received an honorable discharge from the Army in 1946 and returned to teaching. Against medical predictions, he survived far longer than the 2 years doctors had given him. He taught history at Urbana High School in Illinois, resuming married life with Elder and their daughter Carol. Remarkably, he rarely spoke about his wartime experiences. His daughter later revealed that she knew little about his combat record until after his death. This silence was common among combat veterans, but particularly poignant given the extraordinary nature of Carpenter's service. In summers, he ran a boys' camp in the Ozarks, teaching outdoor skills and character development. Former campers interviewed decades later remembered him as strict but fair, with high expectations for behavior and effort. Charles Carpenter died in 1966. Having outlived his doctor's prognosis by 19 years. He spent those years teaching young Americans about history, perhaps hoping they would understand that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when circumstances demand it. His students remembered him as demanding but fair, never knowing they were being taught by someone who had changed the nature of aerial warfare through sheer will and innovation. For decades after the war, the fate of Rosie the Rocketer remained unknown. The aircraft had presumably been scrapped like thousands of other war surplus L-4s, its historical significance unrecognized. Then, in October 2017, aviation historians made a remarkable discovery. Serial number 43-30426 was found in the collection of the Austrian Aviation Museum in Bad Vöslau, Austria. How it arrived there remains unclear, but the aircraft was definitely Carpenter's. Serial numbers and other markings confirmed its identity. More remarkably, the aircraft retained evidence of its combat service, including multiple professionally patched bullet holes. The Collings Foundation acquired the aircraft in 2019 and brought it back to the United States. A careful restoration followed, with historians and technicians working to return Rosie to her wartime configuration. The bullet hole patches were preserved as historical evidence of the aircraft's combat service. The restoration revealed previously undocumented details about Carpenter's modifications. The mounting points for the bazookas were still visible on the wing struts. Analysis of the patches showed that bullets had struck from multiple angles, confirming accounts of attacks through heavy ground fire. Some patches overlapped, indicating the aircraft had been repaired multiple times between missions. While Carpenter's bazooka-armed L-4 was never officially adopted as a weapon system, the concept influenced military thinking about organic army aviation. The idea that ground forces needed their own air support, not dependent on Air Force priorities, gained credibility through examples like Carpenter's direct battlefield intervention. The Korean War saw limited experiments with armed light aircraft, though none achieved Carpenter's success. The real vindication of his concept came with the development of attack helicopters in the 1960s. The AH-1 Cobra and later Apache helicopters embodied the same principle: slow, low-altitude platforms delivering direct fire support to ground forces. Modern military doctrine recognizes the value of what Carpenter demonstrated, that air support doesn't always require fast jets and heavy bombs. Sometimes precise firepower delivered at close range by a platform that can loiter and observe is more valuable than high-speed attack runs. The improvised nature of Carpenter's weapon system also influenced military thinking about field modifications and soldier-driven innovation. The US military became more receptive to bottom-up improvements, recognizing that combat troops often developed practical solutions that engineers hadn't considered. Carpenter's personal letters and interviews reveal a complex individual. He wasn't a glory seeker or reckless thrill seeker. His comments to reporters and letters home suggest someone who understood the moral complexities of war while maintaining absolute determination to do his duty. He expressed pride in his achievements, but also sadness at the necessity of killing. One particularly poignant letter, written after destroying a Tiger tank, reflected on the humanity of his enemies. They were someone's sons, perhaps fathers, but they were trying to kill his friends, and he couldn't allow that. This emotional intelligence, combined with tactical brilliance, made him exceptional among warriors. Carol Apaki, his daughter, described her father as a peaceful man who compartmentalized his war experiences. He had moved on emotionally, she said in interviews. She thought he came back from the war shattered, and it was a hard time for her mother too, trying to start life over again, waiting 4 years for him to come home, thinking he never would. A bronze sculpture unveiled at Moline High School in 2023 commemorates Carpenter's service, showing him standing beside a representation of his L-4. The dedication ceremony drew veterans, historians, and aviation enthusiasts from across the country. Former students from his teaching years, now elderly themselves, shared memories of a dedicated educator who never mentioned his wartime heroics. The American Heritage Museum in Massachusetts, where the restored Rosie the Rocketer is displayed, created an extensive exhibit about Carpenter's service. Visitors can see the actual aircraft, complete with bullet holes, and learn about the man who turned an observation plane into a tank destroyer. The Experimental Aircraft Association features Carpenter's story in educational programs, using his innovation as an example of American ingenuity and determination. Young pilots learn not just about his tactical achievements, but about the kind of thinking that turns limitations into advantages. Military historians continue to study Carpenter's tactics and their impact on the Lorraine campaign. While his 6 confirmed tank kills might seem modest compared to thousands of tanks destroyed in World War II, the psychological and tactical impact far exceeded the raw numbers. Carpenter's success raises important questions about innovation, courage, and the nature of warfare. How did a history teacher with no special combat training become one of the war's most unusual aces? The answer lies in a combination of factors that rarely align. First, his position as General Wood's personal pilot gave him unusual freedom to pursue his own initiatives. Most L-4 pilots were restricted to specific reconnaissance patterns and schedules. Carpenter could hunt targets of opportunity, choosing when and where to strike. Second, his teaching background may have contributed to his tactical thinking. History teachers understand patterns, cause and effect, and the importance of timing. Carpenter applied these analytical skills to combat, recognizing vulnerabilities others might have missed. Third, the specific conditions of the Lorraine campaign created opportunities for his unique tactics. The relatively open terrain, concentration of German armor, and fluid nature of the battle meant targets were available if one was brave enough to engage them. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, Carpenter possessed a rare combination of courage and fatalism that allowed him to repeatedly risk everything. His comment about attacking every minute of every hour revealed someone who had accepted the likelihood of death and decided to make it count. The statistics of Carpenter's combat service, when examined closely, reveal the extraordinary nature of his achievement. 6 tanks officially confirmed destroyed, including 2 Tiger I heavy tanks. Multiple armored vehicles and trucks destroyed. 16 rockets fired in 3 sorties on September 20th, 1944 alone. Approximately 100 combat missions flown. 0 L-4 Grasshoppers lost despite multiple bullet strikes. 1 pilot survived what should have been impossible odds. Each number represents dozens of split-second decisions, any one of which could have been fatal. The fact that Carpenter survived his combat tour defied probability. Contemporary pilots who attempted similar tactics rarely survived more than a few missions. The economic equation was equally remarkable. The total cost of Carpenter's L-4 and modifications was less than $5,000. The Tiger tanks he destroyed cost over 250,000 Reichsmarks each to produce, not counting training crews and transportation to the battlefield. In purely financial terms, Carpenter achieved one of the highest return on investment ratios of the war. Despite extensive documentation, some aspects of Carpenter's story remain mysterious. How did he maintain psychological stability to continue such dangerous missions? What drove him to push beyond the already dangerous job of observation, flying into the realm of direct combat? His letters provide some clues but no complete answers. He wrote about duty, about protecting fellow soldiers, about wanting the war to end so he could return home. But these motivations, while admirable, don't fully explain the extraordinary risks he took. Perhaps the answer lies in his generational context. The men who fought World War II had survived the Depression. Understanding hardship and sacrifice, they had witnessed the rise of fascism and understood it as an existential threat to democracy. For someone like Carpenter, who taught history and understood the stakes, half measures were unacceptable, or perhaps it was simpler. In war, ordinary people sometimes do extraordinary things because circumstances demand it. Carpenter saw a problem, German tanks killing Americans, and found a solution, however improbable. That the solution required flying a fabric-covered plane into point-blank range of enemy guns was simply an acceptable risk. Carpenter's innovations influenced more than just military tactics. His story became part of the mythology of American ingenuity, the idea that a clever individual with basic tools could overcome sophisticated enemy technology through determination and creative thinking. This narrative resonated particularly strongly in post-war America as the nation sought to understand its victory over enemies that had seemed so formidable. Carpenter's David versus Goliath story provided a perfect metaphor. American practicality and individual initiative triumphing over German engineering and military tradition. The story also influenced how the military thought about innovation. Rather than dismissing unconventional ideas from junior officers or enlisted personnel, commanders became more open to field expedients and soldier-driven improvements. The lesson of Bazooka Charlie was clear. Sometimes the best solutions came from those closest to the problem. For the aviation community, Carpenter's exploits demonstrated the versatility of light aircraft. The humble Piper Cub, designed as a trainer and pleasure aircraft, had proven capable of roles its designers never imagined. This versatility would influence post-war aircraft development, with designers increasingly considering multiple potential uses for their creations. The story of Charles Bazooka Charlie Carpenter defies conventional military narrative. A history teacher flying an unarmed observation plane should not have been able to destroy German heavy tanks. A fabric-covered aircraft with a 65-horsepower engine should not have survived repeated combat missions against ground fire. 6 bazookas strapped to wing struts should not have constituted an effective weapon system. Yet all of these things happened. Between September 1944 and February 1945, Carpenter transformed the L-4 Grasshopper from a passive observation platform into an active combat system. His official tally of 6 tanks destroyed, with 2 Tiger I tanks among that total, stands as one of the most improbable achievements in military aviation history. The German forces at Arracourt and throughout the Lorraine campaign learned to fear the sound of small aircraft engines. What had been harmless spotters became potential death from above. Tank crews who had felt relatively safe from American fighter bombers, which rarely operated in poor weather or at low altitude, now faced a threat they couldn't effectively counter. The transformation in German tactics, from ignoring L-4s to engaging them with everything available, demonstrates the strategic impact of one pilot's innovation. Carpenter forced the Wehrmacht to adapt its anti-aircraft defenses, disperse its armored formations, and constantly monitor the skies for slow-moving aircraft. These adjustments disrupted German operations and contributed to American success in the Lorraine campaign. More than military achievement, Carpenter's story represents the triumph of ingenuity over conventional thinking. Faced with the problem of German armor, he created an unprecedented solution using available materials and sheer determination. The bazookas were designed for infantry. The L-4 was designed for observation. Combined by someone willing to risk everything, they became something neither designers nor military planners had imagined. The restored Rosie the Rocketer, now displayed with its battle damage preserved, stands as testament to American innovation and individual courage. Each patched bullet hole represents a moment when probability suggested failure, yet Carpenter pressed his attack. The aircraft that should have been destroyed multiple times instead survived to tell its story to future generations. The German tank crews who faced him in France would have been stunned to learn their nemesis was a high school history teacher. They would have been equally amazed to discover that the weapon system terrorizing them was nothing more than 6 infantry bazookas strapped to a civilian aircraft. But perhaps they would have understood the larger truth. In war, innovation, courage, and determination can overcome seemingly impossible odds. The L4 grasshopper that hunted panthers and tigers across France proved that David could still defeat Goliath, especially when David had 6 slingshots and the courage to use them at point-blank range. In the end, that may be the most important lesson from Bazooka Charlie's war. Human ingenuity and raw courage can transform even the humblest tools into weapons of victory.